Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where we are going to be discussing the news that Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson has torn his Achilles and is going to be out for the remainder of the 2024 season. I'm going to avoid as much as possible talking about the off-the-field stuff with Deshaun Watson because I am not trying to catch a lawsuit of any sorts talking about this, all these allegations and such. I do have a little bit of sympathy for the situation of this. Watson is one of the more disliked players in the entire NFL, probably for the right reason, but basically the entire world has been at his neck all season long. He's out here trying to prove himself, and ultimately it goes down like this. Just a bizarre and brutal and unfortunate arc for what was such a promising start to a career that, again, you probably dislike him. I would say love him or hate him. I think there's more people leaning on one side of this. The idea of cheering for an injury doesn't really sit right with me, and I find it hard to not have any sort of sympathy for Deshaun Watson in this situation. That being said, he is the worst contract in NFL history. Worst deal ever made by a franchise was the Browns giving up everything they did for Deshaun Watson. And not just that, but the restructure on top of it as well that makes him basically impossible to get rid of. Where the Browns next season, coming off of this torn Achilles injury, now 5 years past seeing that he's even a good quarterback, let alone a great quarterback, it would cost them $172 million to cut him straight up, which I don't think is a possibility. I understand the Broncos just did it with Russell Wilson, and they feel like they're better off for it. That's almost double the amount of money. I think Wilson was around $80-90 million. This is so unprecedented territory for Deshaun Watson that they really are stuck with him in the building. Now, that being said, just because he's on the roster and just because you have this financial obligation to him does not mean that you have any other obligations to him. The Browns need to be looking forward because at this point, they are now 1-6 and are a hot dumpster fire. I think they can actually be a little bit better, possibly, with Jameis Winston in at quarterback instead, assuming that he is fully healthy and ready to go. He was listed as the team's emergency third quarterback, I think because of injury. Yesterday, he eventually came in because Dorian Thompson-Robinson ended up getting hurt. But I do think that Winston can actually lead this Browns to slightly more competitive offensive football. Maybe that's not the case, but, now they have Nick Chubb. Their season can look a little bit better than it has up to this point. It still doesn't mean that they're a good team and that they have really anything to be playing for necessarily, which it's the NFL. Tanking outright is just not a thing. They did already trade off Amari Cooper with one deal. There are rumors that multiple teams have checked in on Myles Garrett, which would be very interesting on a, potential trade there. I mean, at that point, Myles Garrett is making a ton of money for the Browns. He is far and away their best player on either side of the ball. I don't love the idea of trading him because what kind of precedent does that really set? You still want to have winning culture, and we're talking about the Browns, and as Joe points out in the comment section here, this is the same franchise that went years without a playoff win and then threw Baker Mayfield to the side essentially as soon as he won them a playoff game. So when you're talking about winning culture in Cleveland, I don't know if they know how that really goes in the first place, but that being said, I would be very hesitant to move my best player. I understand the value that they could probably get out of him. I'd be hesitant. Now, that being said, it really is looking towards next season already at this point for the Browns. And I think that the number one thing that really at this point, and the fact that they are 1-6, means that they're probably going to be in prime position to take a quarterback next year. And I understand, there are other issues with this Browns team right now. The offensive line has been largely a mess for this season. The receiving core, certainly not stellar on any level. I like David Njoku as a tight end option, but now, especially without Amari Cooper, I mean, their options are very limited. That being said, though, I think it's time that you got to pull the plug on Deshaun Watson in terms of he can't be your listed starter moving forward unquestionably. Now, what I would do at this point is understand this season is basically already over. Again, tanking is not a thing. If they do have pieces to trade off, I mean, I would be taking calls. I wouldn't jump at anything. I do still think that they have a number of very impressive players on the defensive side of the ball, but I'd be looking to kind of set yourself up in the best possible position that next year you can be in that top 5 and probably take a quarterback, which again, assuming they even have their pick is actually the other part of this, because there's a good chance that they don't. And that's something that I should double check before I get any further here, because there's a chance that the Browns gave up their first round pick for Deshaun Watson. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of a double check here on the fly, but I do think that this is a situation where the Browns have to start pivoting. And if it is a rookie quarterback, assuming that they do have their picks, it appears they do off of a quick Google here looking at clevelandbrowns.com that they have their own picks rounds 1 through 4. So that's at least a positive for them that they can start to find a replacement. I would draft a quarterback, assuming that there is one. I don't love any of the options. I just don't know how much longer they can continue to go on here with Deshaun Watson being the full-blown answer. And they're not going to go and spend money on another quarterback in free agency. There's not going to be a single team that would inquire about Deshaun Watson. I'm a little bit iffy on this upcoming year of quarterback prospects, but that being said, I think they're going to be probably in that top 5 to 10 of the draft, and they need to pull the trigger on somebody because the defense still isn't terrible. They're not the historic levels putting up the stats that they were last year, but they are still a very good core on defense, and this is a team that I don't think is super far away from being competitive once again. I mean, Joe Flacco led them to the playoffs last year, and Joe Flacco is a fine quarterback, but I mean, he's a fine quarterback, and that was with a better defense than they currently have at this point, I suppose. When you look off of production, they still have a lot of the same faces in the locker room right now as well, so it's not like I think that they are completely out of contention of having a good defense once again, but you know, they need to get somebody on the offensive side of the ball that the team can actually resonate behind, and I don't think that that's Watson. I mean, you know, Jameis Winston, he ends up coming out with what was a pretty well-put speech about, you know, the fans cheering for injuries and anything like that. And like I talked about at the beginning of the segment, I do think that rooting for injuries anytime is a pretty gross thing to do out of fandom. But I can also understand the frustration from Cleveland. That being said, these are all Browns fans that were fully on board with Deshaun Watson when he got there. So, I mean, Browns fans, maybe look yourself in the mirror a little bit. Were you the ones celebrating when they traded for Deshaun Watson in the first place? You know, that's sort of an aside there. But I think that the Browns, I mean, they're 1-6 right now. They're tied for last right now in terms of worst record in the league. It's them, the Patriots, and the Panthers. I have to imagine that the Browns are going to win more games than the Pats and the Panthers moving forward this season. They have the Titans behind them, the Giants. The Browns are very much in that top 5 range, and I think that they just have to pull the trigger. And I would probably come out next season, assuming that you feel confident enough in your infrastructure, saying that, you know, X quarterback, whether it's Shedeur Sanders, Quentin Ewers, whoever it may be, that they are the day one starter, or that they're competing in camp with Deshaun Watson. Again, from a team morale standpoint, I mean, really, and the fans have showed this, and, you know, I think it's important for the team. whoever's going to give you the best chance to win football games is where the Browns have to be at right now. And I don't know if Kevin Stefanski is even going to make it to next season at this point. His job very much on the hot seat. A lot of people calling for him because of the penalties and because of the lack of success. I mean, wouldn't be the first time we saw the reigning coach of the year get fired. I don't know if it could be the right move. I don't want to, plant my flag in pro or anti-Stefanski. He's done a lot of good in the NFL since taking over for the Browns, but just tumultuous front office decisions have continued to haunt this Browns team for decades. And I don't know, at a certain point, I mean, again, you move off of Baker, where he had given his everything. He played through that final season dealing with injuries, and you invest so heavily into a quarterback with the checkered history that Deshaun Watson has. At some point, call it karma, just call it, I don't know. They got what was coming to them to some degree. So, just, again, a very messy situation as a whole here. And the Browns, they're looking forward to next season already. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section, what you think they should do. Again, if there's one thing I know, it's that eating $172 million just to get somebody out of your locker room, that is too far of a price, I think. And, also with the Broncos part of it as well, like with him and with Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, it was very public, the behind the scenes of Peyton and the coaches trying to get Russell Wilson to sit so they didn't have to pay him as much money. That was so ugly in terms of a chemistry standpoint. I don't think it's gotten to that point with Cleveland that I think you just got to suck it up, keep him on the roster. Him being there is going to make it more difficult to, build a roster around him being on the books. But him not being there would cost them even more money to a point where I just don't think you can do it. I do think that there is a great chance that Deshaun Watson has started his last game for the Browns. If I were to make a bet, I would say that, barring some sort of injury to ex-quarterback that they go out in the offseason, I feel like the Browns' plan for next year is going to be having somebody else at the helm. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, wherever you may be keeping up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well. And we will be back same time as always at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern tomorrow. We'll have some breakdowns on the Monday Night Football games from tonight and more. So we will see you then. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go.